your whole life you've been a comic book nerd fan. What do you call yourself, fan or nerd?
You could use both. It depends. Whatever gets me the date.
So you had it right off the bat.
Yeah. Got right in.
You're a lonely man.
No. It's just it's the Kasha Aggie hangover.
So what was it that got you what got you into comic books?
Do you remember Earl's Drugs?
I do. Yeah.
So it was 5th grade. And I went over to Earl's Drugs after school. I was going to walk home, and I walked home with a few, the gang that lived on my street.
Right.
And I went in there, and it was an Iron Man comic. And I just was looking, and there was something about the gold and the red and the cover. And I remember just picking it up, and I just bought the comic, and I loved reading it. And so then I went back to Earl's Drugs the next day and started buying up other stuff. Spider-Man. Then I saw that they said, Iron Man's on a team. I bought the Avengers, and then there were all these cartoons on, and I just started, I had a little bit of that Super Friends cartoon thing, but even as a kid, I didn't, I found them boring. It wasn't like action packed.
It's funny. I had a totally different experience at Earl's. They had video games there. They had Crazy Climber, as well as Moon Patrol. That I'd go there after school and play. And have Jolly Ranchers, but that's not even the best part. The guy who owned the place, he used to show me penthouses behind the counter. He'd do, hey, you want to see a penthouse? So totally different experience.
Did he offer you some candy too?
No, I bought the candy. He didn't even...
You bought the candy.
And then he's like, hey, you guys want to look at me and Jim Bowler? Yeah, he'd like, hey, you want to see some penthouses? And he let us look. And it's like 6th grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. Did he let you sample the cough medicine too?
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. Well, that had nothing to do with what I wanted to ask you about, but you led me down that path.
Okay. Well, we can get back.
Yeah.
So
was comic books like back then? Was it as big as it is now?
No,
it's an industry now.
Oh yeah, it's full on. Back then it was there were some off color cartoons that were on, and comic book stores were just like little hole in the wall places, and you could buy them for 25 cents.
Sure, right.
They're 30 cents. You could get like a grocery bag full for like $10. It was great.
And are you that into it that you go to conventions? Have you ever been to a convention?
Oh yeah, I used to work at conventions when I worked for the Empire Comics.
Oh yeah, you had to.
Yeah. And then as I got to be more of an adult, I still go. I don't dress up or anything like that.
No,
I have not been to San Diego Comic Con. I want to go there.
I'm shocked you haven't.
Exchange. New York Comic Con I've been to, and it's a madhouse.
Yeah. Where do they do that one?
At the Javits Center.
Oh, the Javits.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We just heard about the Javits not too long ago. Yeah. All right. Hey, listen, who do you got today?
All right. We are doing a little local flavor today.
Nice.
Accent on the flavor remark. Right. We have Jason Barrett. He is the founder, CEO, and everything you can imagine about Black Button Distillery, based here in Rochester, New York.
Nice.
And I am pleased to announce that in addition to him being the founder of Black Button Distillery, they have recently produced their 2 millionth bottle of bourbon.
That's a lot of bourbon.
I'm a bourbon fan, so I am really excited to speak with Jason today. Jason, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Yeah.
No problem. Gentlemen, you're too polite. Yes. Please. Yeah. You're going to ruin our reputation.
You just heard what I was talking about. I'm no gentleman.
So Black Button Distilling, let's just talk about where you are right now, and then I want to start from the beginning. So because our listeners, it's a big thing for us to hear the story about where you got your inspiration, how you got into this, and really the building part is really key. But let's start where you are right now. We're in this coming out of COVID world right now. How's it going? Where are you right now, and what's happening with the distillery and some other projects?
So craft distilling has been hit pretty hard by COVID.
Yep.
The restaurants and bars were some of the main ways that we would get our products into market. So obviously significant losses in liquor revenue there, because even the places that are doing takeout often aren't able to do to-go cocktails, or if they are, they're having to be very price conscientious, which we completely understand, but certainly makes that difficult. Our team has worked very hard the last year, really turning over every rock, pulling out every stop, and we're proud to say that we are completely flat with last year.
Wow. Congratulations.
which normally one would not celebrate being exactly where you were a year ago. especially considering we've brought on significant numbers of staff to do that. But
if you were on Wall Street, your stock would double.
That's a pretty good day.
That's the world we live in. If you were on Wall Street, if you were public right now, you'd be worth more than Ford Motor Company just for saying that. That's great.
We're working hard at it.
That's awesome. So any of the tasting rooms, any of the rooms open, like, or are you just purely like in a quote unquote wholesale mode?
So our Rochester tasting room is currently open for outside service, and every Saturday we've got some brave souls that come down to the market and enjoy some spiked hot cocoa around a fire pit. We'll have more hours once the weather breaks and it gets a little nicer. But we actually closed our Buffalo tasting room prior to COVID, just as part of a structural realignment for the company.
Sure.
So that's been closed for over a year now.
Sure. Oh, that's great to know. I will definitely have to check it out over the weekend. That's great.
Yeah, you'd like that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a fun Saturday afternoon, especially if the sun is shining and it's not too cold. We've got great Adirondack chairs and a fire pit and some hot boozy cocktails. And
I love that word.
I do too. That's great. That is good to know. And then, we'll talk about future when we get back to this. So that's good to know that you guys you're flat to last year. You've got things going on. Really appreciate that you could, not only keep people on, but hire people. That's a huge feat.
That's big, especially now.
And a lot of companies aren't doing that. I was just lauding Delta Airlines yesterday for paying bonuses to employees.
I saw you posted that.
They had pay cuts, and they paid bonuses to those that had pay cuts to try to even them out, which no other airline's doing that. So that's incredible. So I think for the business you're in, Jason, for you to keep people on and actually hire people, get people jobs, and find ways to survive is it's admirable, and it's humane, and it's just the kind thing to do. So congratulations on that.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, we were very proud. We, with some of the hand sanitizer work that we were doing last year, we were able to do bonuses for our staff during the production, and then we did a pretty nice Christmas bonus as well.
Oh my God, that's awesome!
And they earned it. The whole team, put their shoulder into it and crushed for the whole year, and we wanted to make sure they knew that we appreciated all of that. We also actually gave everybody 2 mental health PTO days to use in January and February because, again, everybody's been pushing for a whole year really hard. Just, we want them to take some long weekends. And some folks even added in a couple of their own PTO days, took a whole week, and just little staycations to refresh and reset their minds and come back ready to keep pushing because, unfortunately, 2021's also going to be a tough slog.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
No, it is for sure. This year we're just trying to figure out how to. We're treading water, right? We're figuring out how to swim. For me, 2022 is all about. It's not even about growth. It's about regrowth. You got to snip a few things back. Like you close the Buffalo tasting room. Maybe that'll reopen. Maybe it'll take a different form. Maybe it'll open in a different part of the state. It's all about snipping back a bit and then regrowth. And I got to tell you, I listen, for you to do that for your employees, not only just the payout, but the mental health days, that's just the way to lead a company. And I'll tell you, if there's a way to invest, I think I know there's a lot of people who invest in a company like yours simply because of the leadership, not because of what you do. And that's how I invest. I invest in the people that run the company, not really what the company does. Well, you got to pay attention to what the company does a little bit. There's certain things.
But I get your point. Bet the jockey, not the horse.
That's right. Exactly. So let's go back a bit. So I know that this idea started, you were raised in Penfield, born and raised in Penfield, New York, which is a suburb of Rochester. And I know you started this around the age of 19 when you were in college. Maybe making alcohol, you were in college when it started, but what led you to that? Was there anything pre-college, or was this in your head? I'm just curious because it's a great story.
So I was actually an RA my sophomore year of college. I was enforcing the rules, and I then wasn't an RA my junior year, but I knew how the rules worked, and I ended up researching a paper about prohibition, and through the research, discovered that though I couldn't buy beer, I could buy everything that was needed to make beer. And so I went up to a homebrew shop in Syracuse, more nervous than probably anyone rightfully should be, paid cash, so there'd be no paper trail. And it was more an act of defiance than like an act of access to alcohol. But yeah, I started brewing in the closet of my dorm room. My roommate thought it was hysterical.
We got Al Capone here. Okay.
Yeah. And the beer wasn't very good, I'll be honest. I knew nothing about what I was doing and was cutting a lot of corners because, we were trying to do this on the cheap. But I graduated from college and took up homebrewing as a real hobby when I moved down to DC. That led me to being introduced to some breweries and eventually a distillery. And when I kind of got sick of the corporate world, which was faster than most people do, I decided I wanted to run my own company, and I liked making booze. So, if you could, you could put your energy towards working at anything, making whiskeys, not a bad thing to spend the day doing.
No, definitely not. So let's dive in a little deeper around that. So this paper on prohibition, was this like for was this for a class or like what? There's lots of things papers I did, but I just never.
So I was a political science major.
Okay.
And actually specialized in political and tax policy. And one thing that's interesting about prohibition, they had to do two really interesting things. One, they had to convince everyone that alcohol was evil. So that's a hard selling point. Right. But two, you go 20 years before prohibition, 75% of the government's revenue came from excise taxes. So on liquor. So before they could pass prohibition, they had to change how the government collected funds. And that's actually where the birth of the modern income tax came from. So you can thank all the pre-prohibition or the prohibitionists when you do your taxes every April 15th. That was their idea on how to fund the government without the government being reliant on alcohol.
Wow.
Had no idea.
Wow. I know. Well, it's kind of,
Always goes back to booze.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. Hey, Jason,
so,
where'd that title Black Button come from?
So my family's actually been making buttons in Rochester for 4 generations. If you know where Monroe Ave meets 490, the building now called Button Lofts, that was the MD shop.
Oh, wow, really?
Factory.
All right.
Yep. You'd walked in there in 1922. My great-grandfather was the shop foreman. My great-grandmother actually worked one of the machines. My mother still runs that company today. It was just one problem with passing it on to the next generation. I'm colorblind. So there was a joke when I was a kid that if I took over the factory, we'd have to switch to only making black buttons. So I decided I would make some black buttons, but of the liquid variety.
Very good.
So so in college, you just the beer that you read about prohibition, and then you're just like, I'm going to brew. You and a few guys are like, we'll brew our own beer. That's where it kind of started. And through this, then you moved to DC. You worked for another local Rochester company. You worked for Paychex, right?
Yep.
So you're at that corporate job at Paychex down in DC. But while you're doing that, your hobby is starting to take up more of your time.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing about homebrewing, you make beer 5 gallons at a time. And that's a lot of any individual style of beer to drink. So you end up giving it away to friends who then want to come and brew more beer with you. And you drink the beer while you're making more beer. But as you have like a spiraling effect or snowballing effect, because as you make more beer, you have to give it away to more people, which now have more people that want to come do it with you. So you make even more beer. So pretty quickly I was making, probably 30 to 50 gallons a month in my kitchen. Every weekend, having people over, drinking beer, making beer. And I ended up getting to know a lot of the breweries in DC. Yeah. And then DC ended up with its first distillery, Catoctin Creek. They became a client of mine at Paychex. And I realized everything I loved about making beer, I could turn into making whiskey. But at the end, you have whiskey, which is ever so much more fun. And I was a little afraid that I had maybe missed the craft beer boom. This was 2012. There would have been about 5 breweries in Rochester at that point. So opening the 6th was less exciting to me, whereas being the first distillery was exciting. Yeah. Obviously now there's over 20 breweries.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But anyway, yeah, the distillery just seemed to suit my taste a little more. And so I dove headlong into that.
And that was all just from you were just kind of self-taught, right? From the brewing of beer. And then, because I know you've got a really powerful, I call it powerful certificate. So I'd love to hear and then tell us about the certificate that you have, because I know you're like the only place in New York that can train master distillers.
So I went to a couple of apprentice programs out on the West Coast, and I did my master distilling work at Dry Fly Distilling in Spokane, Washington.
Wow.
Got certified out there, came back. They're real, the distilling industry is very West Coast based. I mean, the same way beer was in like the 80s. They got better laws. They've got better access to capital and some other things that just make brewing and distilling work better on the West Coast in Colorado. And there was nobody doing those programs here on the East Coast. So we started one up. Each year we certify about 8 to 10 master distillers. It's a full hands-on apprentice program that requires, not everybody that applies gets in. It's not just like signing up for a class at the YMCA or anything. And we've had people come and spend the time with us and not pass. And obviously that's not the goal. We work to get them to the right level. Both myself and my business partner, Jeff Fairbrother, are U.S. master distillers.
Yep.
And then because we're super gin nerds, we actually went over to England and got certified by the Worshipful Company of Distillers as UK Warden Rectifiers. So there's only 7, basically the equivalent of master distillers, but from the British side, there's only 7 of those in the United States, and 2 of them work at Black Button.
That is incredible, because I read that, and I'm thank you for giving us the detail around that, because I read that it's the only place in New York State that you can. Well, actually, it's beyond New York, right? Probably. I mean, there's 6 or 5 other people.
There's one in Ohio now, but the next school that we really compete with is down in Kentucky.
Wow.
And what I find interesting, the place in Kentucky is just a school. They don't run an operating distillery, whereas we're making whiskey day in and day out. So if you want to learn from folks that are actually walking miles in those shoes, you got to go to Colorado before you're really going to find the level of education that we do.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is.
So, and it's been very rewarding. I've got some very close friends
I'm sure.
that have been former students. So
I'm sure the tasting parties must be amazing.
When we get together, it can get a little epic.
Yeah.
Epic. That tells you everything you need to know.
Right? Yeah. So,
I mean, you figure everybody brings 1 or 2 full bottles of whiskey.
Yeah.
And then you, of course, want to try everyone else. It's like a bad potluck dinner.
Yeah. Everybody
brings way too much stuff. And at the end, everybody's way too full.
Yeah, exactly. So listen, the way you talk about it, it might seem to people like, oh, wow, that's great. He just decided he's going to do this. And then he did some apprenticeships. And it's like, no, it takes time to do it, and to do it really well. So you put in all this hard work. You get these amazing certifications. You know what you're doing. Tell us more about, maybe in as much detail as you can, about just how did you pick your site? How did you hire your employees? What was at the time, did you have a vision and mission, or did that come after you opened? Did you have like a 3 or 5 year plan, or is it like, hey, we're just going to take it quarter by quarter? I'd just love to hear as much detail as you can on that.
Yeah. So we had a really solid business plan. I'd probably spent about 18 months really honing it, passing it by other entrepreneurs, passing it by folks in the industry, looking for people to beat it up so we could fix those things. Okay. I had a full 10-year projection. We blew through the 10-year projection in 3 years, but it was still good to have the 10-year projection. The site selection was really just that I knew I wanted to be near the public market. Yeah. To me, that's the epicenter of food in Rochester, and it had the handy thing of also being zoned correctly. And at the time being a little more industrial than it is today, yeah. which made the rent very affordable. So it was sort of the perfect Venn diagram of, it's close to where people that love food go. It's affordable, and its zoning is correct.
Yep.
And then we were very fortunate that that Rohrbox Brewing Company, which owns the building we're in, was nice enough to lease us the 5,000 square feet that we call home.
Wow.
For hiring staff, I mean, that one was kind of a funny one. The very first few staff members were actually friends of mine, friends from high school that came to work for me part-time in those early days, sometimes for booze, sometimes for being paid properly. When it was time to hire real employees, I put an ad up on Indeed, we were really looking for sort of a jack of all trades, accounting, office manager, tasting room manager. And this really lovely woman applied, and she didn't really have relevant experience, and she didn't have anything that would suggest that this was a good plan.
Right.
She had run a shipping department for an electronics company. But she wrote a letter that explained why she had a go-get-'em attitude and feared nothing. And I met with her and a couple other people, and we hit it off. And for that first 2 years, she was the only full-time employee. We had some part-time bartenders on the weekends.
Yeah, mostly
people that had stopped in and been like, "Wow, I love what you're doing. Any chance you need some help?" And we're like, "Well, yeah, actually." It all just kind of worked itself out. But obviously lots of challenges as well. We had one bartender early on, I remember, who was like, "Oh, I'm not going to work the weekends. Monday through Friday is for work.
Oh, that's great.
Saturday
for bartending.
is for relaxation." I'm like, "Well, I mean, I get you, but we're only open on Saturday, so you're not going to get a lot of bartending hours if you can't work on Saturdays. So maybe this just isn't a fit for you."
Right.
But overall, we've been very blessed. We've got a great staff now. We've worked with a lot of great people. And again, some of our folks that have moved on have stayed good friends. I still see that first employee. She hasn't worked for me for 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Life moved on and things changed for her, and she ultimately took a different job, but we still get together a couple times a year.
That's how it should be. You were a landing zone for her. You helped her grow in her career by giving her, a
launching pad.
A wider berth of experience. She probably learned a lot. She was able to contribute as well, which is a great balance. Then when they're ready, they move on. I've done that with employees before, and in a way, you're sad to see them go. But then I'm just glad that it happened, and I'm glad you're going on to something better.
And it really is a powerful thing. Our very first full-time sales rep is a young man named Charles Marone. And, he was in a dead-end job at in an accounting department. He wanted to get into sales, but to get into sales, everybody said he had to have sales experience, and he didn't have any formal sales experience. I knew his uncle quite well. We got connected, and these are early days. I mean, there was no reason to believe we were going to be successful.
Right.
And I made him a deal. I was like, "Listen, I have enough money to pay you for 8 weeks. You and I have to sell 130 boxes in the next 8 weeks for me to keep you, and then 20 boxes a week after that. And if we're at 125 8 weeks from now, I have to let you go. I literally will not be able to afford your salary. But I will do everything I can to help you be successful.
Wow.
If you'll do everything you can to be successful." He took that leap. He helped us grow our business significantly. He worked for me for about 4 years. And then he got an opportunity to move into tech sales, which is what he wanted. And today he's actually the vice president of sales of the company that he left us for. And when I talked to him, he's like, "Jason, it's the same things you always taught me. It's, get a process, work the process, know your metrics, know your numbers, and just keep hustling." And today, he's got a whole sales career and a family, and I love the fact that we were able to be a part of that and gave him an opportunity to succeed where other businesses had passed him over.
Yep.
And he's still, again, a good friend. And most folks that know us well will notice that my daughter's nickname is Charlie. And some of that is related to the fact that he's one of our best success stories.
That's great.
It was huge for us, and it turned out to be huge for him as well. So it was a great a great opportunity for both parties.
I love that it's you hire to attitude. You're not actually hiring. I mean, in some cases, you need a certain skill set, but you're just hiring for that attitude or personality. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether the person, as long as they've got the purposeful part of the job down, you can teach the function. And that's how I've always tried to operate too. It's like sometimes I've hired people like, what the hell are you hiring that person for? I'm like, great attitude, wants to work hard. They're a builder. That's all I need. All this other functional crap, we can teach them. And I wish more companies would think that way, because they're missing out on a lot of great talent.
Yeah, you can teach on skills. You can't teach on attitude.
That's right.
And I mean, a majority of my sales force today does not have a college degree.
And you don't need one.
They work hard. We lay out the plan of how they can be successful. They work that program. And some of them, again, can make $70,000, $80,000 a year having never finished college. And in some ways, I prefer that, because they've got a hustle and a mindset that they want. This is their chance to be successful, and we want to help them be a part of that.
That's amazing. And I've one of the things that I do a lot of mentoring now, and there's some most are in their 20s, and most have gone to college, but some haven't. And some of them, I tell that, I'm like, it's okay. There's no rule that says you have to go to college. There's no rule that says because I didn't do this, I can't do this. It's like that might be how everybody was raised way back when.
It's old fashioned.
It's old fashioned.
Yep.
There's none of that anymore. And that's another big part of the show, right? You don't have to follow a linear path.
No, you don't.
Don't go to college. Or, what happened to taking a gap year? I wish I had. Just take a gap year, go work, and then see if you have the aptitude for school. And if you still do, you go. To be honest, I'm glad I went to school, but if I had taken a gap year, I don't know. I know I still would be me, I would be but I would be doing something completely different, I think. I don't know.
And that's the same way I feel about study abroad opportunities.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed a summer in college that I spent in Spain. But I really think if I'd had an opportunity to do another one, I'd be a more worldly person with different outlooks on life.
Yeah.
And the opportunity to spend 6 months in Europe, and how do they live, and what do they do, and how does that culture work? I think it's invaluable to people. Also gives you a lot of sense of independence.
For sure.
When you're on the other side of the world, if something happens, you got to deal with it. Mm-hmm. You can't just, phone home and, have mommy drive down to see you.
That's right. Yeah.
I think it gives young folks a lot of independence, which I think is good.
Yep.
Hey, Jason, we got, with the podcast, we have people who listen probably, all over the country. We have some people in Europe that listen.
Yep.
Can they find your product in other states around the world? Is it just local?
So we distribute to 14 states here in the United States, and we do export to Japan. Unfortunately, exporting to Europe's not currently possible or on the horizon. There's just a lot of regulatory stuff that goes into that. But the neat part that just happened in really the last 8 months, there have been a lot of changes to direct-to-consumer shipping. And it turns out we can now ship to 48 of the 50 states. We're missing like Nebraska and South Dakota. Yeah. So actually, if folks are listening, they can go right to our website. They can have bottles delivered right to their home.
Yeah, we don't have any listeners in those 2 states. That's it.
And those folks can just have it delivered to a neighbor across state lines.
There you go. And what's the website?
blackbuttondistilling.com.
Perfect. Blackbuttondistilling.com. One other question I have, though, but back kind of around the origin, and that's just because I know a few people are going to be asking this already. So you found the right location, the Venn diagram, right location, right price, right customer base. Did you bootstrap it to get in there? Like, how did you get in there? Was it like the security deposit, and then you had to have money to refit the whole place and build it out? Like, that's a big undertaking. So how did that go? Let's hear about that.
So when I had moved to DC, I had bought a fixer-upper house with some money that I worked for a couple years, wanted to get out an apartment, could only afford a pretty cheap house that needed a lot of work. Luckily, I'm good with my hands, and I like doing that stuff. So I had fixed the house up, and also the neighborhood had improved while I was there. So I was able to cash out of that house and my 401k with about $250,000.
Okay.
The problem being that was not nearly enough. So I went to 17 banks. Luckily, 2 of the 17 said yes. So they lent me another $250,000. I now had $500,000 to start the company.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it took about $600,000 to start the company. And for those of you with at least 10th grade math, you'll notice that 600 is more than 500. So we did a small crowdfunding campaign where we raised about $30,000 from the community through Kickstarter. And then we put the rest of it on credit cards, and we opened our doors about 40 grand in the hole, juggling credit cards to keep the bank at bay. And yeah, those first years were rough. I mean, all the money I had set aside to pay myself, gone. All the money I had set aside to make bourbon, gone. All the money, I was supposed to use to have an apartment, gone. So I actually ended up living on a futon in my office for the first 18 months.
Ooh, 18 months?
Yes. Now, I mean, for what it's worth,
wow.
I was also my folks, I stayed at my folks' house a couple nights a week.
Yeah, of course.
But sure. I was also, I was working like 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
We do the accounting and the sales during daylight hours. And then after dinner, I'd fire up the still and make whiskey into the night so that we could bottle it the next day. And so there wasn't a lot of reason to go home because you just had to come right back.
So when you were starting this, what was your support system like with the family? Were people like patting you on the back saying, yeah, keep going? Were there people saying you really made a big mistake?
So my family's always been very supportive.
Great.
And only later did I find out that some of that support was maybe, that they was more to my face, and privately they were like, what the hell is this kid doing? And I know this is going to sound odd, but I think the way I explained part of it to them helped make it easier for them to understand. I was 24 years old. A very good friend of mine from high school had not taken the same path as me, was just working kind of minimum wage jobs, but he was happy. And the problem was here I was working this big corporate job. I was on the Rising Star program. I've got a 401k and I'm not happy. And part of that was the drive to want to do my own thing is I just wanted to be happy. And I even talked to my folks. I was like, honestly, this all goes to shit and I'm bankrupt before I'm 30. At least I tried. And I'll go back to that corporate job and I'll work off my debts and I'll start over. But I'd rather try and not make it than not have tried and wonder. And I'll know it all before I'm 30. And there's plenty of folks that at 30 are living paycheck to paycheck. So What do I have to lose?
There's no rules on that either.
Nope.
Yeah. And I think that helped them understand where I was coming from on it. And, they were kind enough to let me stay in the guest room and feed me, which was also important.
Helpful.
And actually, the other part of that, so my now wife and I have actually known each other since high school. We did not start dating until I came back to Rochester and started the distillery. But, here she was working a normal 40-hour week, and then most nights coming and hanging out with me while I'm making whiskey and, we're watching, maybe we turn on Netflix on a laptop. But she was very supportive as well, because had she been saying, I want you to take me to a fancy dinner. I want you to take me out,
Yeah.
If she had wanted more of those maybe traditional things in our 20s, it would have put a lot of stress on me because I didn't have any money.
Right.
And
you were doing what you wanted to be doing.
Yeah. And she was very, very helpful and very supportive. Which is, of course, then why I married her.
Right. Well, listen, it's great. Listen, it's great to find somebody, I always say, that wants to come along for the ride. Sometimes, and you know what? You could be one of those people too. But if you're the one that's actually in the driver's seat, it's like, look, here's what's going on. Yeah, I would love this, but you got to come along for the ride. Yep. And when you find somebody that wants to come along for the ride and is supportive like that, that to me is one of those invaluable things that, you can't put a price on that. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've always just gotten a lot of what works for us is spending time together. Yeah, we even now, if we're going out, we often are going somewhere more simple than fancy, just because it's more about spending time together.
Yep.
So that our priorities are aligned, and I also try to make sure to support her in her goals and what she wants to do.
Of course.
So it goes well for both of us.
Yeah, that's great. And that's one thing I think that this whole predicament we've been in for just over a year has taught a lot of people. It's like, yeah, there is time. Life is short, but life's not really that short if you don't get distracted by the wrong things. It's like you can still do your thing and support other people while you're doing it, and vice versa, which is great. So one thing to kind of wrap up where you are now, and obviously you can't tell me all the secrets or tell us all the secrets, but so you like, are you taking things in terms of a year, a quarter, 2 years, 3 years? Like, I know your 10-year plan you did in 3 years. So how are you planning now? Because I think a lot of businesses are struggling with that. And to be quite frank, I think some of them are focused too much on the future, but you might prove me wrong. So how are you planning now? Like,
So we have one little difference from most businesses.
Yep.
About 25% of our revenue comes from our aged products. And so we have to forecast that out 5 or 6 years in advance.
Wow.
In order to, because it also, the process of making whiskey, you cut down a tree, you make staves out of that tree, you age those staves for 2 years, you then make a barrel out of those staves, you put the whiskey in it, you then age that for 4 to 6 years. So we have to actually tell our cooper how many trees to cut down this year for the stuff we want to sell at the end of the decade.
Wow.
And although there are staves available, if you don't get it right, they're much more expensive.
Sure.
And there isn't always access. So in the early years, that was actually a major hurdle to getting started.
So what informs you on that? Honestly, this is crazy. I mean, I almost want to hire you guys to forecast for the company I work for. My God.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So we have some pretty nice Excel models. And then we have a very trusty Magic 8 Ball.
Okay.
And the other part that often constrains it, honestly, for us is cash, because you have to be able to pay for making the barrels today. So oftentimes, actually, we have a projection of what we want to make, and then we have a realization of what we really can make in terms of our today cash flow. So usually that's actually the constraining point, but we have to have that long-term vision to be able to figure that stuff out and really try to project the company's growth. We know that's not terribly accurate, and we joke at the end of it, all we know is the only thing that's not going to happen is what our plan is. We then have a much more robust 1-year plan. Yeah. Where every December we sit down, we look at every single account, buy every product, and we adjust, where are we hiring more people? Where are we doing more marketing? Where are we doing less marketing? And that gives us a very robust plan. And then we try to manage that plan by month. So, the sales reps know every Thursday where they stand against what they're supposed to deliver that month and whether they're ahead or behind. And the folks that are ahead get coached on trying to blow the number out of the water. And the folks that are behind, we try to catch them up. And the folks in the middle get it real easy because we're dealing with the other two groups. But yeah, for us, it's sort of a 3-step process, real long-term vision that's more just indicative, a 1-year really milestone plan that's by month. And, for every revenue account, for every expense account. And we really try to hold to that because, if you, and obviously then still adjust as the world moves around.
Right. But what I'm getting from you is it's like, instead of just, I think a lot of companies were thinking so far out. And what I love about your approach is it's like, no, it's about what's going on in the moment, like right now.
Yes.
And month to month. And then you can look at the quarter and then you can be like, oh, maybe we could forecast, because we're doing so well this quarter, maybe we could forecast a little more next quarter and push, especially your top performers. You can push them a little bit and maybe add some incentives and whatnot in there. But in terms of trying to forecast out the next 3 years, 4 years, in terms of the barrel aging, I get it. But everything else, it's like for companies to try to forecast out that far now in this world. One thing we've learned, I don't think that's possible, and I think it could be dangerous if you do it too much.
I mean, I always think it's funny. We have some significant bank loans, and part of our covenants to that is that every year we turn in a bi-month 3-year projection.
Yeah.
And it's due in July of each year. So July of this past year, they asked me for my 3-year projection. And I really did kind of laugh. I'm like, do you know what happened the last 3 months?
Yeah.
Like the world turned upside down. We gave them a number anyway, and we'll have updated ones for them this July. And I understand why they're important.
Yeah.
But yeah, spending too much time on things that are too far in the future just ends up being a waste of time and resources. Yep. Because the question is, what can you do today? What can you do this month to put numbers on the board and move you towards that ultimate goal? And yeah, you need to know the direction you're heading, but you got to live in the moment and keep that ball focused every day.
Yeah. Throwing darts are for fun, not for business. So I agree with you. I
like that. That's a t-shirt.
That's a t-shirt. Yeah. Well, Jason, I just want to thank you for your time today. We always appreciate our guests giving time out of their busy days. And I know you've got a lot, even though you're probably not doing 18-hour days as much anymore, or maybe you are, your time is still very valuable. So I just wanted to happy to do it. This was great. And once things start getting back, it'll be a new world. Once the new world officially starts, we'd love to have you back on and talk about, where you are with the business and some other things that you'll be doing. But for now, we've been talking with Jason Barrett. He is the founder and CEO of Black Button Distilling in Rochester, New York. You can find it at blackbuttondistilling.com. And please come visit. I know I will be. On Saturdays, you can sit outside in a lounge chair and get some hot cocoa with a whiskey back and sit by the fire. Anything I missed there? Are we good?
Yeah, I think you guys got it.
Excellent. And nice Adirondack chair.
And that's right, the Adirondack chair. Not a fan.
I'm not a fan of the Adirondack chair, but go out and enjoy those Adirondack chairs.
Yeah, but when you have bourbon in your cocoa,
it's impossible to get out of an Adirondack chair sober. I can't imagine when you have a little buzz on.
Yeah, you just put a blanket put a blanket on people. Anyway, but Jason, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Wow,
that was great.
I love the local flavor. You got to add in the local flavor.
I like the local. You know what? I also forever you hear about. Like craft beer. Like I've heard about it forever, but I never heard much about craft spirits. And it was just interesting to, hear that whole story and how he got it going. It's great.
Exactly.
So there's 486 breweries in New York State and about 60 craft distilleries.
Yeah.
See?
Give you a perspective of just how much smaller we are as an industry.
And how much, and that tells you right there how much the businesses differ.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot. Huge.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah, I mean, Rohrbach's Brewing Company is arguably the oldest craft brewery in the nation. It was started in 1987, in Rochester, not the nation. Oldest craft brewery in Rochester, 1987. We're the oldest distillery in Rochester. Started the company in 2012, but didn't start production till 2014.
There.
So, very different timescales there.
Oh, completely. Anyway, yeah. So, and I also liked that we just talked, we talked a lot about the building piece. It takes a lot of time to build these, any business you got to put your heart and soul into. But this, right. I mean, with the complexities here, it takes a lot. And hey, I like what Jason said earlier. Just it's like, hey, you got to work the process, know your numbers, and just keep hustling. And I think there's a lot of people out there, regardless of age, that are in that mode of like, it's, I want to start something. And in my opinion, it's never too late to start. No. But you've got to, that's what you got to do. The hustle's a big part of it, but you've also got to come up with some type of journey or process that you can work while you're hustling along. So yeah. I really love that. But this was great.
It was great. That was a good time.
Awesome.
All right. Hey, say goodbye, George.
Goodbye, George.